Okay, back to listening to this woman talking about her spells.
Additional protection. Sea salt is highly protective in nature. It is considered a cleansing agent.
In what sense, and in what sense would salt be of use in this particular situation? What does it do energetically? What energy does it take out of a situation? What does it put in? What does it prevent? What does it allow? In what respects would salt have the right physical property or energetic properties to be useful in this?
And so it is commonly used in protection style workings as a way of marking a border, an edge of a territory, for instance.
Yes, but the question is why, and what does it protect against specifically? Do we know? And why can't you explain it to me?
Where nothing unwanted is able to cross that threshold spiritually. Now,
again, in what sense? And if it is a question of programming the salt so it excludes some things and allows other things in, then essentially what is it excluding and what is it allowing in? Can we have some proper experimentation on that, please?
Now, I think it is important to mention, they don't say it here, that salt does kill the earth. And so you'll likely find that wherever you've marked that salt down, you'll find that the earth does die in that location.
Well, the salt will have an effect upon the natural living things there, of course it will. And you have to be quite cognizant of that.
So, once you've been practicing for a while, you might be able to think of an alternative. Perhaps eggshell powder, being highly protective, could be worked with for this property.
But why would you select eggshell powder as opposed to salt, and why is salt better than eggshell powder or eggshell powder better than salt? And if it is purely symbolic, why would you want to use either?
Perhaps you could use chalk that has been charged with your energy for protection as a way of marking out that space as well. Lots of alternatives here, but that is something that you can learn and develop over time. The full moon is typically used because it is a point of high power.
In what sense? Now, in ancient times, people would have celebrated at the full moon because they had light. Okay, they just had some natural light at night, therefore they could party later. That's why you have full moon rituals in ancient religions. It's not specifically a question, oh, there is definitely some objective spiritual energy there. There might be, there might not be. It's a question of how you put it to the test. And if so, if you're going to use, as it were, lunar cycles, you'd surely have to work out why one particular phase of the moon is better than another, and to have some variety of experience and education and studies in terms of doing different things at different times of the year, or different times of the month, or different times of the week, to ascertain whether that is necessarily necessary.
And so that is the kind of power that we're going to be drawing on in this working.
So is that drawing on a power, or is that just a question of there is a cosmic symbol which is happening and you're choosing to use that symbolically to assist you in whatever it is you're doing? I think there's a difference there.
It also means that we can effectively work outside without having to use light, especially if it is a nice clear night.
That's the wisdom, okay? That's the real wisdom. There'll be some light and it'll appear a bit mystical and a bit spooky because you got moonlight, and therefore psychologically it'll be very good for you. Well, good for, entering into that meditative state.
Now, once you know all of that reasoning, we can then start figuring out why things are done the way they're done. So the candles are placed on top of the pentacle because it is a symbol of protection and also a symbol of unity and power.
So what you're doing is you're associating some meanings with the candles themselves. So therefore that's psychological.
All of that energy is coming together, and so you're using it as a way of empowering those objects. If you wanted to, you could take it a step further and put that pentacle inside your house somewhere as a way of offering internal protection as well as those candles working externally. We're working in a clockwise motion because clockwise or deersil is designed to be drawing things in.
Because of the direction that the sun appears to go around the earth.
When you are opening a circle for your ritual purposes, you're doing it in a clockwise motion. When you are walking and delineating the edge of a compass, you are doing it in a clockwise motion.
And that's because the sun appears to go around the world clockwise when we're in the northern hemisphere. Okay, it just goes around in that way because it does. And therefore we associate meaning to it. It's not necessarily that that's a component which has a particular specific effect. It's a question of a psychological association, and I think we have to just eliminate the differences between our own psychological associations and what could actually be having an effect upon energy.
Is really useful for applying something, whereas if we were to be removing something, you would be working anti-clockwise or widdershins. So just that simple motion is really powerful and potent. And then once you've dismantled all of that, you can say, okay, well, I don't have a pentacle. Well, what was the pentacle used for? The pentacle was so that you could charge all of those candles. You can charge them without requiring the pentacle. You can just do that yourself. Well, I don't have any sea salt. Okay, well, that's fine. If you have children's chalk, you can be charging that and using that instead.
But also when you're talking about charging it, again, what specifically do we mean? Presumably the application of meaning to that thing. Now, if that is an energetic experience and there is an actual imprinting of energy and information into the chalk or into the salt or into the pentagram or whatever it is, surely there needs to be sufficient explanation as to how one is reliably doing that and sending messages into the salt or into the this, that and the other, and an appropriate means of divination to make sure it is there in sufficient type and quality.
You might not even need to use any kind of salt, because what the salt is doing is acting as a boundary.
So therefore it's a psychological boundary and a boundary of the mind. So you might as well just cast your circle with visualization and seal it with your finger, visualizing a beam of light coming out of your finger to cast a circle with, which does seem to create an effect and seems to lower forms of psychic interference. But you haven't mentioned that.
If you can delineate that boundary yourself by walking it repeatedly, then that's an alternative to having to use salt. If you don't have turnips, then you can say, okay, well, I don't necessarily need turnips, but I can just use the lanterns, and then maybe I could add a sigil in there that represents protection. And so really quickly, we can start taking things out of that working, changing it up, switching it round. You can have this exact same working be used to protect a smaller circle. Say, for instance, you want to do a ritual with a group. You don't need to protect a large property. Instead, you just need to protect the inner space that that group is going to be working in. Or maybe you only want to do this inside your room. You don't need to be doing this around a big space. You can do this around a little space too. And then really quickly, we can start taking workings that we find in books like this and making them your own. And
yes, but the claim in the spell book is that this is a thing which will prevent people from coming into the space. Alright, so if you're talking about taking things out of it, putting things back into it, what you're not doing is making an assessment as to precisely how efficient and effective it would be to remove these things and to insert other things, and whether this will actually be right or wrong. And also there's no real sense of explanation as to what is actually making the magic happen, where the energy is coming from, where it seems to go to, and anything else. We got a lot of fun theatricals in this, but what we don't have is hard and fast facts.
And genuinely, the first step from advancing from a beginner practitioner to a more advanced practitioner is to start adapting the spells. You don't need to start by just going in and making a spell from scratch. But if you start with the whys, and then the next thing is adapting those spells, so if I flick through and find...
I think you've got more whys to ask.
Find another one that I think could be useful. Let's have a look-see. Okay, so this one here, just up here, is called To Encourage Sweet Dreams. To help call the dream of your choice, you need a dark blue candle, lavender oil, pen and paper. It's suggested to do this during the full moon.
This one actually strikes me as quite fun and a good bit of fun psychology, possibly very good for insomniacs like myself, just to help chill yourself out.
As evening falls, take the candle and dress it with lavender oil. Carry the candle to your bedroom. On a slip of paper...
Now, the lavender oil will be quite important, because if you massage that into a candle, some of it will be going into your skin and you'll be getting the medicinal effects of the lavender oil itself, which it does have some soporific benefits. And also ladies going through their time with a month often use lavender as a means of helping to reduce spasms. So yes, you're essentially doing aromatherapy on yourself there.
Write down the type of dream you want to have. Concentrate hard on experiencing that dream. This is known as dream incubation. Now light the candle and put...
That's an interesting use of terminology applied to it.
The spell paper next to it. When the candle is almost burned down, your room will be filled with the scent of lavender. Burn the spell paper and get ready for bed. Snuff out the candle, get into bed and wait for your dream to come. Now you might read this and you might go, oh, well, I don't have a dark blue candle. Now,
Well, essentially, you shouldn't be worrying about whether you got a dark blue candle. You've got to be worrying about the psychology which you're bringing in, the meditative state which you're doing these things in, and making sure you're bringing that suggestion deep into yourself when you're doing it, because presumably it's much more of a work of suggestion than anything else.
Dark blue candles are typically used for things that are connected with the subconscious.
I mean, there's no real mention here of bringing a spirit in which is then going to do work for you or to you, is it?
Conscious mind. They're also commonly used for communication workings. But if you don't have a dark blue candle, you could switch that out for a white candle. If you are allergic to lavender, then lavender oil is not something that you're going to want to use. So then it's about going through certain books, such as these. So we have reference books, which are going to give you
Or why don't you actually read a book about aromatherapy and find a oil which has the beneficial effects that you're looking for but is not actually lavender?
alternatives. So for instance, this is Scott Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs. I swear by this book. I absolutely love it. We then also have Scott Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Crystal, Gem and Metal Magic. That's a different book on the subject. But if you were to go through a book like this and you've gone, okay, well, I can't use lavender because I'm allergic to it. What else can I use? And we're thinking, okay, what rules over dreams? So we're using the full moon during this working. The moon is very connected with psychic work, with dreams, with divination, so maybe...
So what would have to happen then is you would have to spend a bit of time building up an understanding over a period of many years as to what different phases of the moon seem to do to you. And then you would have to choose your state of phase of the moon based upon what you think it does to you. And so therefore that's not a question of you do it at the full moon because someone says or some book said, but because you've built up an association with the meanings of the full moon, for which someone else will get better experiences at the dark moon maybe. It's more to do with individual energetic psychological preference, surely, in that particular instance.
Maybe you could use an oil that instead connects with the moon, and you have some options. You have lemon balm, you have eucalyptus, gardenia, you have jasmine, myrrh, sandalwood. There's a lot of options there that are associated with the moon. You also have narcissus as an example of something you could be using for sleep. And so you can really start using books like this to expand your magical knowledge further. If we're
Well, no, it wouldn't be expanding your magical knowledge further, would it? It would be enhancing the number of icons or idols or symbols which would have extra meanings for you. But that's more like understanding your symbolism, your symbology as a person, rather than necessarily the energy field and the manipulation of the energy field for the purposes of creating change in the outer world.
For instance, you know you can't be burning something inside. If you can create a sigil out of the words that you would want to include in that dream writing, you can wear that sigil, draw it on your skin with an eyeliner pen or an eyebrow pen, and it means that you still have that same energy going into that working. And this is what can make the
Psychology, darling.
biggest difference, because it can take something that could be very expensive, having to buy new stuff every single day, to something that is really affordable because you're using what you have. You're going to get to the point where you no longer need to rely on a spell book. If you say that you need a confidence working, you're able to pull from your own knowledge that you really like tiger eye for confidence. You really like the colour orange, and so you can create a confidence charm or a necklace. You can wrap it around a candle or place it around a candle holder with an orange candle in the centre that is dressed with confidence oil, that has a sigil carved into the front of it for confidence, and you have a tiger eye stone in front of it, and you can say the words that you want to say, you can light that candle, you can burn it down. No spell book needed.
Yeah, but that's focusing exclusively upon the ritual tools and accessories that is cool to use, rather than necessarily understanding the psychology of confidence and how to boost confidence inside yourself, and using your placebo ritual as a means of stimulating that particular psychological phenomena inside you, which will then give you the ability to do what it is you're attempting to do as a result of being confident. Which therefore means that what you're describing is simplistic. What I'm describing requires a bit more complex, nuanced understanding of the human animal. So therefore, real, genuine wisdom.
It is incredibly powerful for this purpose. I'm not sure if any of that made sense because I've had to refilm this section about 15 times because I couldn't get my words out. The next piece of advice that I have is to not get stuck in a rut. It is so easy to do it. You find a style of practice that works and you stick with it. But especially if you are a beginner, this can actually be really detrimental. I'll often be asked, as a beginner, how do I know what type of witch I am? And the answer is always that the type of witch you are is designed to fit your practice.
It's more a question of what you are, what type of person you are, what your psychological makeup is, what kind of things you enjoy or gives you this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? It's a question of trying to deploy as much self-knowledge as you can. Surely that's what we're talking about here.
Not the other way around. The types of witchcraft are not boxes that we need to squish ourselves into. We need to figure out what works best for us first.
Yeah, but witchcraft itself is a box which people squish themselves into.
And choose a description for that practice later. If you like the idea of candle magic, then try candle magic, but don't be afraid to also try green witchcraft or lunar witchcraft. Maybe sea witchcraft or elemental magic reaches out to you.
So this is much more describing an individual working out where they stand spiritually and what symbols and ideas is nicer for them to create an aesthetic, prayerful experience. It's not a specific form of knowledge telling you how to control the outer world using supernatural forces.
It's really important to not get stuck in a little tiny box, because as time goes on, you're going to find it becoming more and more restrictive, especially if it's the only way that you've learned to practice. It would essentially be like learning to ride a bike all over again when you try and do something else.
That's a gross exaggeration.
Because the techniques are going to be slightly different. So if you can, try not to only carry out one style of practice. As tempting as it is, it means it's so much harder for us to grow beyond that point when we do get stuck in our comfort zone. And another thing to add here is to not just rely on your own energy. Reach out to other things, work with different spirits and deities if you feel comfortable doing.
Now that's a curious thing. As in other energy, what do you mean? What type? Well, and if it isn't energy, how strong is the energy and what specific things can it do? And in what ways have you put that energy to the test to explore what it can do and its limitations? You can't go, it's going to bring another energy in. Okay, but what is it? And how do you know you're perceiving it clearly and accurately?
So, and even just expand your practice from just working with the mundane thing. Now, I'm the first one to say that I very easily get stuck in ruts. I also work with my own energy a lot, and I like tactile things.
What do you mean, work with your own energy a lot? Can you be more accurate and precise about that, and how can you differentiate your energy from the energy of something else?
But it's important to not rely on them too heavily, because especially if you don't have a lot of energy or your energy manipulation techniques are not super advanced yet, it's very, very easy to become energetically drained. When this happens, we don't want to carry out a magical practice. So for instance, if you work with herbs in your magical practice, why not also work with the plant spirits? Build a bond and develop some allies with certain plants of significance that you work with regularly.
How? In what respects? And how are you going to make that reliable?
That way in your magical practice you're not just working with, say, basil or mugwort. Instead you're working with the spirit of basil and the spirit of mugwort. It helps elevate your workings, can take some of the energetic pressure off you, and it helps develop your green witchcraft and your green thumb just a little bit more. If you work a lot with candle magic, why not look into working with the fire element, specifically the elementals? These could be a really great benefit to your
In what sense? How do you know they're there, and how do you know they'll be compliant?
magical practice. It's not something that you have to do, but it can elevate your practice a little bit further. If you enjoy working with elemental representations during a circle casting, why not also call on the elementals of the 4 directions into workings?
Can you be more precise?
Mix and match different elementals for different intentions.
Will they get on?
If you want something for emotional passion, maybe water and fire. If you
And in what specific respects would that help, and how could you take that and program it into a manner which would provide you with the results you're after?
want something to keep yourself grounded, then maybe something with the earth element. It's a way of elevating your practice one step above. It doesn't mean that you have to do it all the time, or that your practice is better if you do, but it can be a way of developing your practice and your experience a little bit more to even just test it out and see if you like it.
That's just more to do with seeing what you're feeling comfortable with when it comes to spirituality and prayer. It's not really The control of nature.
If deities are something that really interests you, have a look into them, see which deities really call out to you and which ones don't. If you
Why?
want to work with servitors or familiars, have a look into it. It's
Why and how? And what are the specifics of doing it for what purpose?
about taking that step outside and knowing that you are capable.
But you don't know you're capable unless you put things efficiently to the test and you've learned how to challenge your experiences.
And I think, if anything, that is the biggest piece of advice I can give. Well, maybe not biggest, because I think the figuring out the why is probably the most important.
This entire video is full of why.
But it's about getting to a point where if something went wrong, you would be able to fix it.
Right, now this is where it gets really, really complicated, because he's talking, oh, what if something goes wrong, something goes wrong. You haven't mentioned what could go wrong, how it could go wrong, in what way it could go wrong, or indeed in what way you can repair it. If the theology is accurate and you're talking about dealing with real elementals and real spirits and real gods of ancient, I don't know, Babylonia or somewhere, and they are real the way that you're stipulating, then essentially we must be dealing with something incredibly complicated. Does she go into this in great detail?
And that's what we really need to be working on, is I don't want anyone to be scared of their magical practice.
Yes, but you're also talking about invocation of deities, alright, who might like you or might not, okay? And you're saying you shouldn't be scared of this? Either they're, real or they're not, or if they are real, in what particular way are they real, and why would you even contemplate the idea of discussing entities in terms of like ancient pagan deities in something which is supposed to, in this particular example, protect your room against an invader, and in what particular way would that deity actually give a shit about your property?
Anyone to be scared of spirits or deities or doing a working in case something goes wrong.
Well, that's what a lot of witchcraft is unfortunately about, and there's lots of fear about what could possibly go wrong and what's really wrong with it, and that's one of the reasons why there's so much superstitious fear and dread going on in magic and witchcraft and paganism and occultism, is because you're told that these things are real, these things work. And it's the culture which does it.
I want you to have the tools to be able to fix it if it does.
What are they?
And I think that is such a massive distinction between a beginner and a more experienced practitioner.
What are they?
If something goes wrong and you're a beginner, you'll often reach out to other practitioners because
In what sense has it gone wrong?
you don't know what to do.
Oh yeah, and in what particular phenomena is going to happen whereby my ritual will fail?
A panicked mindset sets in of, oh no, I've messed this up, I'm in a panic mode now, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, brought about by what?
Whereas if you are a more experienced practitioner, if something goes wrong, you might still reach out to people. You might still get a little bit panicked, but ultimately you can take a step back from the situation and you have enough skills to be...
Gone wrong in what sense? What have I got? A whopping great poltergeist running around in my bedroom?
be able to implement them to get yourself out of it.
Yes, but out of what?
And that is so, so important.
So it's so important, so you're going to tell us how it's done then, pretty please, with sugar on top?
Make sure that you know your foundational practices, that you can work with your energy effectively. Make sure you have some protection and shielding techniques. Make sure you know how to cleanse a space, perhaps banish something if necessary.
Okay, well, we've got a few more minutes. I'll set the camera going for the last bit.